My name is Jeff Knopf. I'm a member of the faculty here at the Middlebury Institute, and I have the privilege of serving as the chair of our MA program in Non-Proliferation and Terrorism Studies. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our two speakers today. They are two members of a three-person team. Very slight change to the title I see on the slide versus what we had sort of advertised, but I gather it's the same research.
It is. No
Public support for arms control in the third nuclear age. Our two speakers are Michal Smetana, who is a professor, associate professor at Charles University, which is in Prague, and the founder and director of the Peace Research Center Prague. He's joined by Ondrej Rosendorf, who has research affiliations with the Peace Research Center in Prague, and one in Hamburg, which I had tried to memorize, but had not.
Nobody remembers that. It's way too long.
I'm going to look it up on my phone. Institute for Peace Research and Security Policy at the University of Hamburg, presumably in Germany. And with that, I will turn it over to both of you guys.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff, for this kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. Hi, everyone online. There are three reasons why we are here today. First of all, it's always great to see Jeff and everyone here. It's been 4 years since I was here for the last time, and yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here after this period. So that's one reason. Another one is we love seafood, so on our trip around California, we just wanted to include something.
Prague doesn't have great seafood?
No. We are a landlocked country with no access, so yeah. So I mean, that's always nice to get some excuse to do that, and I hope that during lunch we will actually go for that. And the third reason is that 2 years ago, we got a grant from Stanton Foundation where we were specifically tasked to study public views on arms control in a very complicated era. Today, when the arms control architecture as we knew it is crumbling, disintegrating, at a time when there are huge tensions among great powers, United States, Russia, and China. And we simply don't know what the public thinks about arms control, and we wanted to find out something about it. So this is a presentation of three studies that we conducted, and I will just briefly guide you through what we wanted to do, what we did, what we found, and what it means. And I would actually love to hear your thoughts about what it means, because I mean, this is a very fresh stuff. I mean, we haven't really written the paper yet based on this. I mean, this is something we'll be doing in the next couple of months. So we are collecting a lot of feedback, from different institutions, from different colleagues to hear, I mean, what it actually means that we found in these studies. So I wanted to open it with this picture from the 1980s. Jeff was nostalgically looking at it before we started because he remembers like very vividly. It's a picture from one of the freeze demonstrations in the 1980s where Americans, but to some extent also like many other people in Western countries, including UK, Netherlands, Germany, were protesting arms races at the time. There were calls for nuclear disarmament. There were calls for cessation of arms races, and there were, of course, these calls were taking place in a specific time, right? At a specific time where there were actually huge concerns about Reagan administration, about what would happen in the relationship between United States and Soviet Union, in an era that eventually led to some really milestone arms control agreements, as we know them today, and where public actually mattered, where public pressure actually was to some extent shaping this debate. Jeff, in fact, wrote his book, and as well as at least one article, or maybe more, that I remember that I know and assigned to my class about the role of these protests, right, in nuclear arms control. And generally, among many scholars that I know, there's a broad agreement that during Cold War, the public pressure actually mattered for arms control talks, right? And it wasn't just 1980s. There's a lot of scholarly evidence on the 1960s when a limited test ban treaty actually came to fruition, but public pressure was actually instrumental in bringing this outcome and to having this treaty in existence. So after the end of the Cold War, after Cold War ended, we know that nuclear weapons ceased to be like a topic of public debate in most Western countries, right? It's not like it didn't appear at all. Of course, we had like different instances when suddenly, nuclear weapons were again in the news, but it was never like this huge topic of a public conversation, and there definitely wasn't any public pressure in most Western countries to do something about nuclear weapons, right? This is one of these big problems, right? Like many people here in this room, as well as online, actually know a lot of colleagues and experts who are pushing for nuclear disarmament for years and are trying to bring as much public attention to this initiative as possible, but we just see that it's not resonating as much with the public as in the 1980s. And that goes for nuclear arms control as well, right? It's simply as nuclear weapons lost their salience in the public debate, suddenly the talks about regulating arms control simply were not like a subject of a proper public debate. It wasn't a political issue. So now we come to a slightly perhaps different era today, and there are a lot of concerns that this will be changing, right? And many of these themes that we knew from the 1980s may be repeating. At least what we are seeing is, and how especially Americans call it, this renewed great power competition, this term where we are actually seeing, again, a lot of clashes so far not open and direct necessarily among the great powers, but at least the idea that great power conflict may once again turn into like a proper great power war. I mean, the concern is there. And we are seeing a lot of developments that should be concerning for anyone following nuclear affairs, right? We have seen Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014, once again connected with some thinly veiled nuclear threats. We see a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, when I would argue that nuclear weapons again became salient in the public debate. I was recently, unfortunately, I don't have it here, but I was recently looking at Google Trends, how suddenly you see this huge spike of nuclear weapons being really like in mainstream media. I myself have been interviewed about nuclear weapons suddenly like almost every week. Before it was like this obscure topic that sometimes they invited me to TV to talk about about nuclear weapons in the North Korean context, right? North Korea deciding, to launch another ballistic missile. So it was like this weird thing at the end of the news to say, okay, so they launched a missile, what it means. Suddenly it was a mainstream debate, right? What it means, what we should do. Suddenly people were Googling, okay, what are nuclear weapons? What would happen if nuclear weapons are used? Where should I buy some iodine tablets? Suddenly all these Google searches appear there, and public started to be worried. At least this is the experience in my country, in Germany, and many other places, right? The German debate, maybe Ondrej can comment on it later. German debate on nuclear weapons has shifted dramatically since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. But it's not the only thing, right? We have seen since 2014 escalation of tensions in the South China Sea. We have seen the expansion of Chinese nuclear arsenal, which many colleagues that you probably know very well personally have discovered, actually like very interesting developments in this area that are, again, very concerning for many Americans, I would say, but also to some extent to people in Western Europe. We have seen over the last decade modernization programs when it comes to nuclear arsenals of all nuclear armed countries, and to some extent qualitative arms races. And all this is happening in the context of a very rapid technological change. When we discuss old nuclear strategies in the context of hypersonic weapons, advanced sensors targeting capabilities, AI developments, I mean, we are seeing a lot of changes that probably suggest that things are changing in nuclear realm as well, right? And this is why many scholars have started using this catchy label third nuclear age. We could discuss how problematic it is to use it or not, but at least, among experts and colleague academics, this kind of caught up that we are now entering a little bit different era when nuclear weapons are playing a somehow different role than between the end of the Cold War and circa 2014. So, does the Western public still support arms control in this third nuclear age? We don't know. This is why we started this project, right? And we had at least like two ways of looking at it that are giving us a little bit different predictions, right? On one hand, what I call here the risk frame is that as nuclear weapons become more salient, people are reading about the risk of nuclear weapons being used. Suddenly they will be more concerned and they will be pushing for some arms control steps, right? That's the idea. This would maybe resemble the 1980s to the extent that people want to get some assurance that, your country is actually doing something about it, right? At the same time, you can pause for a minute.
That sounds like military. Yes, to me.
They're just exercising.
You sure?
We hope. All right, that's a little quieter again. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's hope that this is not a sign of, actually what we are talking about is becoming even more important, but yeah. Let's hope not. So, but we can also see like a different frame. When I'm talking to a lot of colleagues in Romania, Poland, France, many other countries, and when we mention arms control, I mean, many experts and scholars basically shaking their hands and are saying, okay, so this is the worst time to do arms control at all. I mean, we are really against it. It would be seen as a reward to Russia and China for their very problematic behavior. There's a little trust that they will actually keep up with the terms of agreement. So it's like a different way of looking at arms control, right? Not something which is necessary, particularly in the crisis, but let's say something that we basically give as a reward for good behavior. But when the tensions are very high and there's a little trust among countries, it wouldn't be like a good time to reward them with arms control agreements, right? And this is a sentiment that I'm seeing more and more in all these debates. So we didn't know which of these would actually prevail when we asked the public. So our Stanford Foundation project, which we launched, was really about trying to find as much about attitudes towards arms control with both Russia and China. We also wanted to compare the differences, how individuals are seeing these two countries. We did 3 studies. The first one was more exploratory, where we surveyed the public in 5 NATO countries, with like the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland, which would be like sort of representative of this East, West, Europe, US, different countries, some of them, let's say, a little bit more hawkish, some of them more dovish, like what we thought would be Germany, for example. Hawkish would be maybe Poland, which is usually very resolute when it comes to any dealings with Russia, for example. So it was the first one that we launched in last September, October, with 5,000 people in our sample, and that we really wanted to find out about what people would think generally, what would be the reasons to do arms control, what would be the reasons against. Then we did a second study where we tried to look at how the public actually differs from politicians, from elites, because I mean, of course, the public are certainly not the most important aspect of any arms control talks. And we wanted to find out if actually there is some gap between the public and elite attitudes. So we did a comparative study in the UK Parliament. We had a proper sample of a representative of UK Parliament and wanted to see how it fares if we compare it with the general public. And then we did the third study, which was based on a survey experiment, where we wanted to see how these attitudes are stable, how they can be shaped by cues, right? Like that means if, for example, experts or politicians would be priming and messaging to individuals that, okay, I mean, it's not a good idea to do arms control, we cannot trust Russia, or Russia doesn't deserve it, or the same with China, if they can actually reduce the public support for arms control through this messaging. That would help us to see to what extent the public actually has like very strong opinions on this, or to what extent this is potentially shapeable by this messaging. And we did also, as a part of this whole survey, we did a bonus study, which is a part of what we usually do in our own research. We did a bunch of publications on public support for nuclear use, kind of continuing this strength of research that started with Scott Sagan, Nero Press, and Ben Valentino, where we have several studies on how public and elites see potential nuclear use, and we wanted to use this opportunity to survey people again after the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So maybe during the Q&A part, we could actually discuss, this like additional findings that we have, and we also tried to do this on this elite sample of politicians. So I will just now guide you through our results, and then I will be very happy to hear your thoughts and discuss what it means. So the first one, cross-national survey, we actually, to our surprise, found very stable and very high support for arms control with both Russia and China. On the left side here, you see arms control for Russia for these 5 countries. You can see there are very little changes, which really surprised us, very little differences. Even Poland, where we actually expected a lot of skepticism about dealing with Russia, and the Polish experts would be probably like it will be totally reversed. There will be 85% against. Suddenly, we are seeing the public is actually very open to dealing with Russia when it comes to arms control talks. The differences are not statistically significant, even if the overall, but later we will see that some of these countries still differ from United States, for example, in very, very small percentages. When it comes to China, we see overall little higher support, but again, I mean, these are not big differences, right? So it's more differences whether we are in this 80% plus territory or 90% plus territory. Overall, there was a very high overwhelming support for dealing with these two countries. Next, we ask the public why they would want to do arms control, right? What would be the reason? What would be the main reason? So the dominant one was to reduce the risk that there will be a nuclear war. Yeah, I mean, if we look at the 1960s arms control debates and what were defined as the three main reasons for arms control, that was to reduce the risk of nuclear war, that was to reduce harm if there would be a nuclear war, reduce damage that would be dealt, and to potentially to save money because it's costly to build nuclear weapons. The first one, to reduce the risk of nuclear war, is definitely dominant when it comes to the public perception and reasoning. The military budget savings are certainly not that important in a public perspective. Much more important is, again, to reduce damage that would be there if a nuclear war would be launched. Not trivial number of people actually wanted to pursue arms control to improve mutual relations. So it's not just like we want to prevent nuclear war, but it's actually like a tool, a means to achieve something new, right? To improve relationships with Russia or China. And a small number of people actually had some different reasons.
Michal, did you give them a defined list of options?
For this one, yes. We also have open questions, okay, which will be analyzed separately, but for this, we gave them a defined list. So we also ask why some people would actually prefer not to conduct arms control. And here you can see the dominant reason is that the public is concerned that these countries will be cheating, that we cannot trust them, right? This is the dominant reason in case of both Russia and China. Much less important is the fact that these countries don't deserve it because of how they treat Ukraine in the case of Russia, or Taiwan in case of China, or how they treat, how hostile they are to NATO, which were much less prominent reason. There was quite a few people who actually believed that the US deal under current administration wouldn't be negotiated properly. That means that, it's the US administration as it stands wouldn't be able to negotiate a good deal, right? So we can imagine this would be another concern, that maybe they would support arms control, but under administration they trust more. And yeah, once again, there were some other reasons as well, which we need to find out the open answers to understand what would be like the other reasons to not to do it. So this is just a very quick COEF plot to show what individual characteristics are there when it comes to support. We can see that the gender, age, or education actually doesn't really matter much when it comes to support for arms control. But what matters is, in case of China, whether you are more on the conservative or liberal scale, where liberals are more open to dealing with China than conservative. Conservative is not necessarily surprising finding, right? What is important for many arms control advocates is that knowledge actually matters. The more we had some questions to find out how much they know about treaties like New START, and we found out that even relatively limited knowledge, like basic knowledge about this stuff, actually is driving support for arms control higher, which is quite important for any NGOs who are interested in mobilizing more support for arms control, that maybe education actually matters, it's important. Here you can see that even if the differences substantively are not large among countries, then still UK is a country where the support is higher than in case of United States, for example. It's probably the one where we found most support compared to other countries. When it comes to China, all countries are sort of more supportive of arms control than the United States, which is the most skeptical. But still, I would once again emphasize that the support, even in the United States, was relatively high, way higher than we expected. So public elite gaps, this is something that we study a lot generally, because we want to find out to what extent public is special, or what extent the voters and their representatives differ in their in their opinions on different foreign policy issues. And in some previous research, we actually found substantive gaps in foreign policy questions. Here we didn't. When we surveyed the samples of UK parliamentarians and UK public, we saw that there are very, very little differences. Actually, it's like negligible percentages, and statistically, there were basically no differences. So the UK parliamentarians saw the issue very similarly as the UK public. We also asked them about the reasons, which once again, like the patterns generally hold here. For elites, one interesting finding is that for elites, it seems more important, this aspect of improving relations through arms control, that arms control would be just like means to something higher, right? To improve the overall relations. That was quite interesting to us. And when we look at the reasons for not to do so, once again, we can see that the likelihood of cheating of these countries is really dominating in the concern of both the public and the elites, which once again may be interesting for those who want to mobilize some extra support for arms control, right? That may be ameliorating some of these concerns about cheating, because arms control is ultimately about finding a way how to work with opponents that we don't necessarily trust, but we have ways of verifying that they are complying with our agreements. That might be like a interesting way of maybe increasing support farther, or maybe increasing more active support, because the support, like the natural one, is already quite high. And I wanted also to show you the experiments that we did on elite queues. When we saw that the support is very high, there was like a natural question. All right, so let's imagine that there would be someone like President Trump who would maybe start messaging that it's simply not a good idea to do so, right? We all remember how one very specific arms control agreement, the one with Iran, was actually kind of hijacked in the domestic debate, and how some elite messaging can suddenly reduce support for something that maybe the public would generally be open to, but when they hear arguments against, they would suddenly reduce their support, right? So we wanted to try that. So we designed an experiment where we were trying to provide the public with different cues, different messaging about why arms control is not a good idea, to see if this way the support would be reduced. We generally saw that, yes, that the support is not that stable by itself, that actually some messaging can always help to reduce it for those that are interested in trying to reduce it. Here, the difference was from something like in this 80 to 90% territory to 70 to 80% territory. So again, it's not a huge effect, but let's say there were at least like, this 10, 15% of people who were suddenly swayed by different messaging. We were also looking at which of these messages are more effective than others. We saw that generally like any cue, any messaging is more effective than no cue. We also saw to what extent the messaging from which we called aligned, that means aligned with your political orientation. That means if you are getting a cue from a Democrat, if you are a Democrat, it's more effective, right? So that's again not surprising. If you are getting a message from someone with the same political affiliation, you are more persuaded to accept the argument. We also found that the messaging from experts were more effective than from politicians. Overall, they were more persuasive. We didn't really see much difference in the content of the cues. That means when we, for example, provide messages that the country could be cheating, or that the country doesn't deserve to be dealt with because of their attitude towards Taiwan or towards Ukraine, that didn't really matter much. What actually mattered was who was the messenger and where the messenger was coming from what political camp. So these are our findings so far. I would now open it to debate, and then if you'll be interested, we can also show you a few graphs that we did on the support for nuclear use in UK Parliament and also the UK public. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much. Lots of time for questions, so why don't I go ahead and start a list. People who are online, if you use the raise hand function, I can see you. If you want to type a question in the chat, we have Lauren here who can monitor those and read them out. I saw that Bill had a hand up, and then Grace. I don't know everybody, so if you could also introduce yourself when you ask your question. But Bill, why don't you start?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. It's good to I see you again, Michal. No, some of this is impressionistic, but then it leads to a question. My sense is that while you are, absolutely correct about the kind of last period of time when there was, a lot of activism and concern by publics, both the United States and in Europe, was in the 1980s. I actually was teaching in the summer in Bonn during the 80s, and you saw, huge numbers of people turning out, for various demonstrations, and that clearly fell. My sense, though, that there was another, if not surge, at least a significant increase in concern following the 9/11 attacks, but the focus was not on kind of state arms control in the nuclear sector. It was much more of a concern about non-state actors. And then you saw, of course, the Gang of Fours initiative and the kind of focus in particular about the change in the attitudes of these Cold Warriors, because they thought that the threat was very different, that it came from non-state actors. So my question is the degree to which you have any sense of changes on the part of the public with respect to nuclear threats that emanate not from states, but from non-state actors. And I can imagine that to some extent the attacks on Chernobyl, Zaporizhia also may have led to parties, again, perhaps thinking about the risks posed by things that non-state actors might do as well as state actors. I'm just curious if you try to tap that at all in if you have any sense of thinking on that issue.
Perfect, thank you. Should I respond? Or should we...
Yeah, why don't we just question and answer, because we're not a big group, so we have time.
I will answer and let you to comment on it if you want, right? So yeah, 9/11 and nuclear security. I definitely remember there was a lot of concerns that on this more elite level, where it was, discussed quite fiercely. I'm actually wondering to what extent this was a part of the public debate here when it comes to like broader public, because I mean, in Europe, at least in our part of Europe, obviously terrorism was a huge concern at the time, right? I mean, this was really like the main security debate. It even reflected on our work, right? I remember that there was so much interest among students to attend all these, counterterrorism classes, and there was for some period of time that was the defining security topic, at universities and also for the public, right? But as far as I remember, there was little debate about this nuclear aspect. It appeared sometime, of course. I mean, when there was this anthrax threat, there was always connected with this WMD debates. But I remember that for the public, it was always hard to somehow connect it, first of all, with the threat of nuclear weapons, but also more broadly, how this actually relates to some global efforts to pursue disarmament, for example, right? I mean, and I'm talking about a country where Barack Obama actually came to at some point and made a huge speech about how nuclear disarmament is necessary, how he made Prague agenda, this symbol of maybe some new efforts towards nuclear disarmament. But I feel that like the public never re-internalize it as necessary. I mean, the perception was always that this is important for us as a new transatlantic link, which would be bolstered with respect to the United States. But it was never a broad agreement that that's necessary to pursue disarmament. Actually, there was a lot of puzzlement to what extent this is an important issue today, right? I remember when I started studying nuclear weapons, and around the time I was writing some of my first articles, it was always the debate was, does it really matter? I mean, it's really the Cold War debate, right? When we brought up nuclear deterrence in some policy debates in Czech Republic, it was always okay, nuclear deterrence, this is Cold War stuff, right? Why are we talking about it? I mean, it doesn't really matter anymore, right? So my feeling is, and we don't have the data for it, so it's more my impression, is that nuclear weapons, their salience in the public debate was really low even at the time. I believe that changed a lot also because of what you just mentioned. For example, Stephen Herzog, Rebecca Gibbons, Stephen Herzog, Lauren Sukin, and about myself and about 20 other authors are now have like a new study where we surveyed the public in 35 countries, I believe, when we were trying to find out how the events, particularly around Zaporizhia, actually changed public attitudes towards both nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, to what extent there are concerns. And yeah, we can see that there are, the public is generally more concerned about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to support their country building new means of getting energy from nuclear sources, but let's say the concerns are there, right? I mean, all what's happening in Ukraine and the possibility there will be a nuclear catastrophe is once again like very much in the public imagination. I mean, I've been myself interviewed about like 50 times just about this particular issue, right? I mean, it's really making this idea of another Chernobyl very vivid, right? And Chernobyl is really very heavy on the public mind, since 1980s. So that would be just my take on it. What do you think?
Just maybe a very quick comment. I have a paper on informal governance mechanisms in arms control, and as part of this project, I also surveyed the existing informal organizations in the nuclear realm. And interestingly enough, if you look at the organizations that deal with non-state actor threats in the nuclear realm, there are always U.S. initiatives, and it is my impression is that this is a very specific topic or a very specific issue area for the United States government, and whether that actually has any significance for the public debate, I am a little bit doubtful about that. I think most people would obviously intuitively agree that terrorism is bad, nuclear weapons are bad, and both are kind of in combination, right? But if that's I'm doubtful that that's a very salient topic in the public discourse. So yeah.
Do you want to follow up, Bill?
For now, let others come in and I'll come back.
Grace, I'm going to hold you for 1 second. I haven't forgotten much. I'm going to exercise chair's prerogative and just make a couple comments of my own. First of all, actually, is the big survey that you did with Stephen and Lauren, is that publicly available?
I'm happy to send you a copy. We are just submitting to a journal right now.
I would love a copy.
Yeah.
And if other people want it, just contact me, and once I have it from Michal, I'll share it.
It's probably the most extensive project we try. And by the way, it's definitely organized mainly by Stephen and Lauren. I'm just like one of the many co-authors. So
next week anyhow. So just like two thoughts prompted a little bit by Bill's question in your presentation. My sense is very much like Ondrej. I think that the concerns about nuclear terrorism were very elite driven. It was really NGOs that kind of promoted paying attention to that. And I similarly don't have a lot of memory of things that there was a lot of public resonance or agitation around that issue. There are times when elite concerns and public concerns interact in interesting ways. So in the process of trying to rescue my original PhD dissertation and turn it into a book, in the PhD dissertation, I did case studies of the protest movements against atmospheric nuclear testing in the 50s and 60s and the freeze movement right in the 80s and what was their impact on US arms control policy. And I had the good timing to finish it in May of 1991. And so by fall of that year, when I wrote to potential publishers, the Soviet Union had collapsed. It was all over, and all the publishers wrote back to me saying, there's no market for this. We won't waste the time of peer reviewers, because even if they recommended it, the editorial board will decline it because there's no market for this topic. So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and figure out, how do I rescue my dissertation and turn it into a book, which I eventually succeeded in doing. But along the way, one of the things I did is I added a case study on the debates in the late 1960s, early 1970s around anti-ballistic missiles and the run-up to the ABM treaty. And that was one that was, again, very elite-driven, right? It was really the arms control experts who were like, hey, ballistic missile defenses could have these perverse destabilizing consequences. But I discovered through some archival research that actually a graduate research assistant did, and he found some great stuff, that inside the Nixon administration, there was this enormous fear that these small amounts of opposition to ABM stuff would somehow interact with the anti-Vietnam War movement and become massive public protests. And so public opinion still made a difference there, not so much because it was mobilized, but just the anticipation, that it might get mobilized through these sort of elite level cues. So, but I think the nuclear terrorism stuff was different. To me, that was really all at the elite level. Maybe since I'm hogging the floor, I'll say one more thing and then we'll move on to questions. I was very surprised by your findings, and I have one possible interpretation. There was interesting research in the 1980s, sometime by Miroslav Ninčić, where he found that the public sort of acts like a counterweight, at least in the United States. So if you have a very hawkish president who's sort of opposed to arms control, then the public's all like, oh, you're too hawkish. We support arms control. We need to kind of moderate your hardline tendencies. But if you had a very dovish president who's very dedicated to arms control, then public opinion tended to be more hawkish, like, oh, we don't trust you. We think you're going to be too soft on the Soviet Union. We need to kind of rein you back in. So I wonder if this is in part a response to just the fact that arms control is collapsing right now, and the public is sort of saying, well, actually, we'd kind of like this back. So a thought to consider.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Grace, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Grace Smith, and I'm a student here at MIS studying NPTS in a dual degree with the Moscow State Institute of International Relations in Moscow. And something that you said about public disengagement with the nuclear threat made me think of what Dmitry Trenin in Russia is saying right now, which is that their stance, and he's speaking for the ministry in saying that the world isn't scared enough of nuclear weapons and they need to be re-scared so that everybody has the proper level of engagement and fear about nuclear war. And so I don't know if you have thoughts about that, about his stance, and then also whether or not you think the invasion of Ukraine and some of the saber rattling has affected the levels of engagement that we're seeing today. Because I was also surprised by your results. That was from 2023, that study,
Yes,
right?
that's
And that's just a
recent.
very high level of engagement, like across the board with wanting arms control, so.
I believe it's actually crucial to look at it from two different angles, right? Because one thing is the overall support, the other one is engagement in the sense that people do something actively, right? I believe that this is very important to distinguish, because we can actually see like high level of support and concern, which I believe that, rescaring actually worked, as you mentioned, right? I mean, again, like it's been really on public mind as a potentially problematic issue, which I don't think that nuclear terrorism ever was in our part of the world, but this definitely is, and we can see it, reflected in, the questions of journalists, what they are asking about, and how often they want to report about it, because they see that the public is actually engaging with the media topics, right? So that's one aspect. The other one is if people were actually actively doing something about it, where I'm way more skeptical. That's another part that we are, sometimes surveying people to, for example, to how much money they would devote to some initiatives to pursue something, if they would be going out openly demonstrating. We have one paper some years back where we are trying to look at support for disarmament, which we saw has always been very high, right? But around the globe, I mean, if you generally survey people, even Republicans here, they are overall very much in favor of nuclear disarmament. This is a very strong findings over decades, actually, right? We can see that the public is high. But we can still see a difference to what extent people believe it's feasible. It's actually doable, right? My interpretation is that very often when individuals or general public that doesn't know that much about it see disarmament in a way that most ordinary people see peace, right? It's like a very nice idea that they generally support. I mean, they would love to achieve it, but they don't really believe it's realistic or that would happen. And also they are not that much motivated to do something about it unless they feel the threat is really there, right? The danger is very acute, right? So they wouldn't necessarily go and, on a demonstration like the one with 1 million people in the streets of New York, right? For us to imagine today that there will be a 1 million people demonstration in New York protesting nuclear arms races, that's very hard to imagine, right? I mean, I don't know what you would guess, how many people would be there, but I would say like thousands rather than a million, right? So that's a huge difference, right? So it's really about to what extent you feel the threat is acute, and also, what should be done about it, right? So yeah, I believe that people are now scared, but that doesn't necessarily mean like the very active engagement of individuals with this topic. There's another comment I wanted to make is that, yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said. It's very much in line with what both Ondrej and I believe about the public perception of this like nuclear terrorism as a threat itself, but also the linkage between these two concepts, right? And also about the linkage between arms control practices and disarmament goal and nuclear terrorism, which was very prominent in Gang of Four articles, right? That we actually need to pursue disarmament as one way of how to prevent nuclear terrorism from happening. But I don't believe that the public necessarily understands this link. Somehow the link between making these large arms control treaties between Russia and United States, or potentially in future between United States and China, this is somehow more intuitive, like as a way of how states can manage their nuclear affairs with each other. But I don't believe they intuitively never understand the link between arms control and preventing nuclear terrorism, or disarmament and preventing nuclear terrorism. And yeah, the article from Nincic, it makes sense. I mean, it doesn't really make sense because in terms of Biden who's president, who's pro arms control president, right? So I mean, it was on his agenda to actually pursue further arms control after New START. But I get the point that it may. The same logic could apply because people just see that it's not happening and they just want some, express support because they believe we should have that, right? I mean, it's something that when you tell them, all right, New START is ending, maybe we'll be without something that has been here for quite some time. They are just concerned that it will be like a more dangerous new era and something needs to be done about it, right? They want their government to be active and, engage in some stuff, which makes a lot of sense. And I just remember like an interesting thing because we mentioned limited test ban treaty and the protests of 1980s, where I would say the public was very overwhelmingly pro-arms control, right? But we also saw, and correct me if I'm wrong because you remember it way better, the debate around SALT II, arms control agreement, where actually the public support was relatively low overall. There was a lot of surveys at the time, and public was generally, I would say, even like majority was even opposed to the agreement. So we can see there may be some fluctuations, right? And it's interesting to see what are the factors that actually influence whether public supports the agreement or doesn't. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just maybe add like a small comment on. So I think we have to be a little bit careful when we say things like, public support is high, or we speculate that the public support is high because of what's happening in Ukraine, because of statements of the like nuclear saber rattling, right? We don't actually know how much that affects people's attitudes. We don't know that, and this is one of the first surveys at least in a long time that at least explores at face level the public support for arms control. But these contextual factors, that's definitely something we maybe want to explore in the future. But for now, I would be pretty careful about that being like a big factor in influencing people's attitudes to this topic. And as Michal said, it might be something more. The people might think about it in more ambiguous terms as this attitude toward similar to peace, right? Something that's desirable, as a concept. But yeah, that's my thought.
Lauren, do we have anybody online who has a question?
No one online, but I think I saw Kim's hand up. Yeah, so hi, my name is Kim. I'm a visiting researcher here at CNS, currently working on nuclear disarmament verification. And I guess my question also is kind of connected to the previous question. So I was actually also rather astonished about the high percentage of approval for arms control. But then you've also rightly pointed out that many people don't really perceive this topic as something that immediately affects them or that is like very present in their lives. And I come from Germany, so so in Germany, my feeling is that people don't really care about this issue, like, because they care, but they don't think that it affects them in their life so much. So when you ask, for example, someone, do you think that arms control should be supported? Then this person would very easily say yes, but it may not give such a high importance or rating to this question. So, and in that moment, when you don't have this high priority on such a question, I just wonder how robust is the answer that you get from that person, because it can very easily, like, if it's just based on, let's say, a loose perception or like fragile opinion that can easily be kind of manipulated, or let's say you start having other interests, then your opinion can also change quickly. So I just wonder, how robust do you think that this approval is?
You want to?
Maybe, I don't know. Just a random thought,
I just wanted to say, Ondrej, because you're actually living in Germany, so it seems that you guys would have like a way better communication.
No, I think the debate about nuclear weapons in Germany, from my understanding, from my colleagues, is the current debate in the proposals about the European deterrent, the possibility of Germany maybe even acquiring their own nuclear weapons arsenal. I think it's a very fringe debate, in my understanding. It's not something that's part of the mainstream discourse, and some of the people, my colleagues at least, think are not mentally well, the people that support these proposals. So I think that's my general impression of that topic. And maybe I was also thinking, it's hard to, so whenever there's a general consensus on certain topics, like you have almost 90% approval, right, in all these countries for arms control or for any policies, I feel like whenever there's, this high level of support, the issue is usually not that salient. It's usually the issues where you have a clear divide or a polarization that are of higher salience. So this could be also, symptomatic of this not being, such a huge deal for people, right? Maybe people are more willing to agree to the possibility of arms control because what's the worst that could happen, right? So maybe that's one of the factors.
Maybe I have a question to both of you actually about Germany, right? About the public debate, because I'm very often in debate with German experts and scholars who are really not like a representative sample of German population. But, in my own country, it's been an issue of among ordinary people. It's like every scholar or expert who's working in the field of security is suddenly facing this question during this Sunday lunch with grandma, suddenly asking about, the potential of nuclear escalation. This never happened to me before 2022, never, right? I guess my grandma and my parents were always looking at me like this, weird guy who's studying this obscure stuff, right? They don't understand. And suddenly I'm actually getting proper questions from my relatives about, okay, should we do something? Should we, how should we prepare for the possibility that there would be a nuclear war, which really happened to me for the first time after February 2022. So I'm actually wondering if, this is not happening because I can see that in German newspapers, there is not necessarily the debate that much about maybe arms control per se, but about the possibility that the war in Ukraine could result in nuclear escalation. I believe that's reflected a lot, right, in German newspaper, and especially specifically in Germany, where the concern is somehow comparatively way higher than in most Western Europe. So I'm actually wondering if I see it correctly, or maybe you have a different take on that.
I mean, my feeling is that it is like being debated, but the public perception of it is that it's actually nothing that Germany, for example, can do so much about. Like it doesn't really have, like, people see maybe a danger, but they don't really
All right.
kind of know what to do with it. And then also I think the opinion that people have on this matter is not very well funded. So for example, there is this Euro-Turn debate, as you've mentioned, and many people don't really know what to think about it because they just don't have the background and they don't really know what the implications are. So for them, it's a very abstract topic that they never really dealt with, and maybe also from historical, in the last years, didn't have to deal with it. So they're just not very well informed, and that's why they are very perceptive to all kind of things.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. I have one interpretation actually of our finding about this high support is that, and we really need more evidence for what I'm just going to say, right? That my take is that the public overall is concerned about instability that would just like be there if something that has been there for a long time would just disappear, right? Because our questions, we actually didn't provide you here with the actual questionnaire, right? We don't just ask people, do you support arms control? That's nonsensical, right? Many other like public polls do it, and I don't believe these results say anything because people just don't know, right? We actually guide people to explain them at least some stuff at the beginning. We ask them about their knowledge and they're providing with some information so they have some idea about what they are responding to at some point. But I believe that for many people, it's like, okay, there's been some system, of treaties that's been there for a long time. They are now disappearing. And we don't necessarily want that because it's a new world that, we just don't want to be in, right? And this might also explain why the support, for example, in the US is bipartisan, right? So it's like, maybe Republicans would be generally a bit more skeptical about dealing with China. There is some percentage, but the support is still high because, it could be that, in some new world where China is a nuclear power and, is getting more and more nuclear weapons, and maybe it's, all those quests towards parity with the United States, maybe there would be like some kind of stabilizing mechanism that would assure people that things might be all right, right? They are just like concerned that if these things wouldn't exist, these treaties, it would be just like, they would be worse off, right? That would be maybe my interpretation.
Jeffrey, just on a two-finger.
Sure. And then I think I have Shanila next in line.
And I'm skeptical of your last comment because, my impression, and this has to do with the students that I encounter here, but also, other parties. I'm just skeptical that more than a handful of people, the public at large, has any conception of what may have collapsed in terms of the foundation of arms control. They don't know what the START treaties refer to. They have only the vaguest conception of what the non-proliferation treaty is. I don't think that they are worried about nuclear arms control because they see treaties, collapsing. I wish that were not the case, because if it were the case, then it would suggest a far greater understanding of the world in which we live and the nuclear predicament which we face and the role that arms control has played in the past. But I just don't. I find it hard. If you walk out on the street and you talk to 10 people, I doubt if any of them had any idea of who's withdrawn from what treaties remain in existence. What I do think is interesting, because the one question I don't think anybody's responded to was Grace's question with respect to Dmitry Trenin and his particular role in this discussion. What I found most disturbing last week was a new article by Trenin who basically said it may have been the case that the so-called Reagan-Gorbachev principle that a nuclear war cannot be won and therefore must never be fought is no longer valid. And what I'm curious, and I don't think I'm sure he's not speaking for the government, although he may be encouraged by some to make these kinds of accusations. What would be really intriguing, if you have any sense of how the Russian public's attitude toward the likelihood of nuclear war has changed over time. And they used to be, rather good surveys. I don't know if the Levada Center has had any surveys of that sort recently. You may know, Grace, as well. But that's where I worry that the mindset of the Russian public probably has been influenced over time by the inundation of the propaganda that they get on the news, and by parties, like Trenton, who tries to provide some theoretical argument for what other less informed parties are saying. So, I'm sorry, be so long.
No, these are great points. About the first point, I actually don't disagree, and I will say what I mean, right? If we ask anyone on the street, they know very little to nothing about it. But once you actually tell them the background information, which is the part of the political debate, once it becomes political issue, they get some basic information, and part of this information is there's been a new start, which is now ending, and this is what they get also in our survey, right? This treaty is now ending. Should we pursue a replacement? Like, to simplify it, suddenly they have the very vague information. They don't know exactly what's in the treaty. They have some basic information, maybe in the political debate, but they don't understand it perfectly. They don't understand how new start differs from original start or SORT or some other previous agreement. But they understand that there's been some treaty that's been there to stabilize the relations, and now it's ending. And the world where something just is disappearing, and the world might be different, might be concerning for people, right? That's the argument. Not necessarily that they know about it, but they get the information that this treaty is going to expire after quite a few years, right? So that was maybe an idea. About Russia, I have published a piece in Journal of Conflict Resolution 2 years ago, where we surveyed Russians about nuclear use. It's a paper with Michal, Ondrej. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it's before the war in Ukraine. So we don't know how it changed. We are definitely very eager to find out how the war in Ukraine changed these public attitudes in Russia. Or at least I was very concerned about doing it early after the war started for both ethical and practical reasons. For ethical, because I didn't feel like it's ethical asking people very sensitive questions about international security at the moment where they can actually be arrested for their opinions in Russia. And there have been new laws adopted that are qualitatively somewhere else than they were before. So that was one reason. Another reason was that also pragmatically, we were concerned there would be too many people refusing to respond to the survey, which would really have a profound impact on the findings. So I decided to wait with that, and we will eventually do it probably somehow. We also have some statistical techniques where we will find out what they think without them necessarily really responding directly, like the list experiments that are there, a possibility. So we want to do that. We want to find out. I believe that there has been an impact, but we don't necessarily know how big and also in what direction, right? Because once again, it's similar here, right? We can imagine that that this messaging of some Russian elite writers may have influenced the public with being the idea of using nuclear weapon being more normalized to some extent. But you can also imagine that people are just concerned that it would actually happen, right? So they would be expressing more negative attitudes. And I really don't know because we don't have data, but it's $1 million question that I want to find out. We want to do it as soon as it's ethically and practically possible. We want to do a follow-up of the survey. We will most likely just replicate it and just see how it changed. So we want to do that. So I will make sure to send you the findings as soon as we have them, because I myself very curious.
Okay, Sasha Neela, you had a hand up, and we cut you next.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a very interesting debate coming from Pakistan, where nobody asks public what to do, and in this domain. But interestingly, if you go to Pakistan and I'm talking about general public, they're very proud to have nuclear weapons. Some of them, mostly. And if there's a conflict with India, they're always ready to eat nuclear weapons. Talking about general public. So this is a very interesting research, and we need this kind of research in my part of the region as well, in South Asia, to reduce this risk and to see what can we do. I was just wondering, about your sample size and what was your methodology to collect this data? I mean, did you go to universities or undergrad schools, PhD students, or I mean, general public? Like, how did you collected this data? And there was this very interesting question about likelihood of cheating with Russia and China. I mean, this just shows a clear deficit of trust between these countries. So I was wondering, did you have any questions like how to deal with it, how we can remove this trust deficit, like what could be done, like what the public is thinking, whatever your target audience was. So if you had any question on that.
Thank you. These are very good questions. About surveying public in your part of the world, I remember Scott Sagan some years ago was actually conducting some research in India. I don't believe in Pakistan, India, but he ultimately didn't publish his findings. I believe he had huge concerns about the quality of the data he got at the time. I don't want to misinterpret what he told me because it's been quite a few years, but
I've seen one thing, but it's quite old. I want to say it was Zia Mian who did it, but I might not even be remembering correctly who ran the research.
Lisa Koch just recently did some survey in both India and Pakistan, and she wants to publish it soon. So you might see it in press quite soon, or you can email her. So I know that she mentioned it last year when we were for lunch at ISA. So I believe that she would have some new data from India and possibly also Pakistan. So she might be a good contact to talk to. And by the way, I just, when you said that Pakistanis are proud about nuclear weapons, that's actually like fascinating thing about Russia, which sound not very intuitive to people, but it actually makes a lot of sense to me. Because in all the surveys that we have so far, it shows that Russians generally love their weapons, the nuclear weapons, right? They are proud of, their country having nuclear weapons and being on par with other great powers, and they actually see it as a symbol of, of Russia's might, right? So in a way, it's actually not my term. I believe Nikolai Sokov said, Russians actually love their nuclear weapons, right? But they are simultaneously very averse to any idea of using them, which might sound strange, but one thing is actually you see the symbolic and symbol of greatness, and the second one is that you don't actually want to be in a world where nuclear weapons are used. So yeah, so these two things can be true at the same time, which I find interesting. About the methodology, we worked with a company Ipsos, which is like international polling company that did all these 5 surveys. It's on a representative sample of the general population. It's quota representative. That means that it's reflected in terms of gender, region distribution, and age, to respective populations. And in each country, we had sample of 1,000 people representative of the population based on this criteria using online survey. So we have these large online panels where they are sampling people to actually achieve this representativeness. So this is what we did. So it's not a student sample; it's proper, genuine public sample. And the last question about trust: no, we don't know how to address this concern necessary. I mean, arms control literature overall is providing some ideas about how to how to achieve some level of trust in a situation when the trust, is not obvious because the countries that are dealing with each other are actually enemies. So, I mean, the old school debate has been there since 1960s, in my view, still applies. All this debate that is there. But yeah, we didn't really test how that would influence public attitudes. Especially, we actually didn't really do follow-up experiments to see how to increase the support, because we can see the support itself is large. What we would be more interested in the future is to find out how to make people more active about it, right? I mean, how to actually make them to, do something more about arms control and disarmament beyond say, okay, I would like that, but then it's your job and I don't care that much, right? So.
Questions here?
Yeah, I am visiting fellow at CNS and originally from Institute for Nuclear Research, Kyiv. Okay, that is why I have maybe a comment or question. Well, it's my personal, it's not objective. Well, because I'm very surprised a big percentage supports arm control negotiation. You show it's because Israeli people trust Russia because Russia, okay, that Russia will follow all signed papers, all even any negotiation, whatever, because it's for me, it looks like asking people, okay, after 9/11, do we need to make negotiation with Al-Qaeda? Will we have access with this negotiation? Because for me now, when Russia, okay, just today we have lectures from Sokova from Vienna Center of Non-Proliferation, and she told, okay, Russia crushed 5 pillars of nuclear safety and security, captured Zaporizhia nuclear power plant station, exactly only this one. And after that, the people, okay, I understand the people don't want to start the nuclear world war. It's absolutely normal. It's a normal position. But at the same time, the trust to provide, to make this negotiation to arms control and trust the success of this, it's, I'm very surprised. Maybe people are not very have a lot of information, have sufficient information about what really happens, how Russia break all negotiations. I'm very surprised. Even in Germany, United UK, I'm surprised. And maybe it depends from the question which you are asked, because I remember old movie, old book. Yes, Mr. Prime Minister is UK. It depends how you ask question. If you want, one question answer will be, okay, I want my son go to the army. If you build question from another way, the answer will, no, never mind. That is why it's very interesting for me, the set of your questions. And maybe if we will know the set of your questions, we begin understanding, maybe have some idea, such big percentage, trusting is, I'm not trusting is out control.
But actually, our data actually show that people don't really trust Russia, right? I mean, when we ask them for reasons not to deal with Russia, I mean, by far the most of the reason was that, we don't actually trust Russia to give an agreement. At the same time, they say, even if we actually don't really trust them, we still want arms control talk to happen. And they support it, which I also think is fascinating. Which I also think is fascinating because you probably, when you mention your Al-Qaeda example, I mean, this wouldn't be really the case, right? So, I mean, we wouldn't probably see like much support for the Al-Qaeda, irrespective of whether we believe that they would actually hold up the agreement, right? I mean, it would just like politically, it would be unacceptable. And this is what we actually saw that we would see much more in the data, right? That people just wouldn't, because this is what we see in the expert debate in Europe, right? There are a lot of people who basically say, I mean, it's not imaginable for us to engage in any arms control talks with Russia right now, right? Even the soft, even soft position in the debate is, okay, so after the situation somehow improves and Russia, starts behaving, then sure, then we can consider it, right? The extreme debate is, okay, we cannot deal with Russia in like next 50 years, right? So, which I find interesting. Before we launched the survey, we actually did a bunch of pilot studies where we were really doing what you just suggested, to try to ask the questions differently and play around with. The percentage was always the same. Yeah, it really didn't much. I mean, I can imagine that, of course, there are some framings, right? And we can see it in the queuing experiment, right? So if we actually provide the experiment where we immediately prime people by saying, okay, but experts say that we shouldn't really trust Russia to keep their agreements, it reduces the support somehow, but it's still very large, right? We can still see it's like way larger than we would expect, from the debate we are having.
About 75%, I think.
Right. So even if you actually like get like messaging from experts, say, all right, you shouldn't, we cannot really trust Russia to give an agreement. We have concerns about it. It's still like over 70% is support, right? So it's.
By the way, you can read these as like basically proportion of people who agree with.
0.7 is 70%.
It's it's also controlling for some other variables, but yeah.
Yeah, it's controlling for general stuff. Yeah, for instance.
Why Czech Republic absent? Czech Republic absent in this.
Okay,
Because last half year I live in Czech Republic, and I don't feeling that it will be so big support.
I mean, the reason is very pragmatic. I mean, we had limited budget. We just needed to. Okay, I myself check, and I mean, we really need to focus on countries that are more important. So yeah, I can probably afford to say that Czech Republic simply doesn't matter that much in the debate. But Poland was supposed to be, let's say, close to Czech Republic in his opinion, and maybe even more. I don't know. More against like Russia, right? I mean, generally Poland has like many reasons to be, even let's say more extreme on the scale. Right? I mean, Poland is closer to Russia.
Yes.
I mean, they have
They have a border with Belarus.
exactly. So for them, it's even more a pressing issue than for the Czech public. So I mean, at some point we will probably do it. You know, we do a lot of like different surveys, so we might include this question to some other one that we do in the Czech Republic just to find out. But my guess it will be very similar to Poland. Yeah.
So you had your hand at the end.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm Ina. I come from Georgia, and I'm a visiting fellow here at CNS. Actually, my question was somehow covered because I had the questions about those countries. Why did you choose those countries? And if you kind of prepare the pre-analysis of the countries while you are deciding or choosing which country to target and the population, because my understanding is that even in NATO, there are some other countries like Latvia and Lithuania, where because of some geopolitical and other issues, the population might have stronger opinion about the nuclear weapons or arms control and things like that. So it was somehow covered, right? Because, I mean, people are more neutral. Maybe that's my personal opinion in France or in Germany about the arms control, but Lithuania and Latvia are not that neutral about those issues. So.
But you would probably agree. Sorry, I'm jumping into what you're saying, but you would probably expect, or at least what we expected, is that Lithuania or Latvia wouldn't be that far from Poland, right? I mean, that would be my instinct. That
I mean, from Georgian perspective and the support we have from those countries in terms or in light of fighting against Russia, because Georgia also has some issues with Russia. So as the support from the Lithuania and Latvia is more kind of is stronger than Poland, because Poland is sometimes like is under the geopolitical or other issues, and those small countries have more like incentives and more support to such issues. So, yeah. That's my personal opinion, and from Georgia's perspective as well.
Right. Yeah, you may be absolutely right.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because you also said that you are planning to have surveys in 35 countries.
No, sorry, I mentioned that we actually wrote recently a paper with a colleague of mine that we put together a very large team of scholars from different countries. So we have data from around 30 countries about support for nuclear energy in these countries, but we also have a bunch of questions about nuclear weapons. We didn't have any questions about arms control per se. This is very specific for this project, but we have generally like the perception of nuclear risk after war in Ukraine, whether from whether it's an issue of nuclear security or nuclear weapon use. So yeah.
But it's clear why you ask these countries, because United States, Kingdom, and France have nuclear weapon.
Yes.
And this country is the main player on this game with Russia and China. That is why this country included here, and Germany and Poland again.
Yeah.
Now I understand why you choose. Now I understand. It's clear why.
That's good that we want you as a reviewer for a paper.
Are there other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting presentation, and I learned a lot. And a very simple question, and I have some my opinions or my thoughts I would like to share. So I'm originally from Japan, so we do a lot of, in my home country, do like a kind of similar survey, but we never use the term of like arms control. Basically, just to say very simply, do you think a nuclear weapon is necessary? Or is it possible to have a world free of nuclear weapons? And so when you do this type of survey, specifically arms control, in your view, what do you think about people have a very clear idea on what arms control is, or what's the difference between arms control, nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation, or are they kind of using it interchangeably? That's something I'm always very interested in. And also the reason why the people who are supporting arms control is said mainly fear of use of nuclear weapons, and risk reduction is the main component, which is very encouraging, of course. This means most of the people disagree the use of nuclear weapons, and also knowledge really matters. So this really convinced me the importance of education, both public education and especially young generation. And I can't remember if there was any difference between younger generation and older generation, but I work for mainly youth education, and I don't have a specific data, but the more and more younger generation, just through my interaction with a limited number of students, but I strongly feel more, especially recently, more and more younger generations are getting more interested in some intersection between nuclear issues or arms control issues and other social issues, like as we all know, like gender and disarmament and human rights aspects or victim assistance. So this is something I'm quite passionate about, because to engage more people in this field, we could bring some other issues to find some like a nexus between multiple issues. And I also feel, but anyway, that's my own thoughts. So, thank you.
And if you don't know, Masako runs our education and outreach programs to high schools.
And the college students.
Yes.
No, these are great questions. So if the public has a clear idea, I don't think it has, but I don't believe that this is actually like such a problem for a survey, because this is really mimicking the political debate, right? Because we don't expect that when something becomes a subject of a political debate, that suddenly the public will know everything about it, right? It's actually the other way around. The public will know very little, and we are actually interested in what kind of instinct they have about these issues, and then how to, how, for example, like these different politician parties, interest groups can influence it. To what extent, these attitudes are like, strong and clear, to what extent they are shapeable by different arguments, right? So, so we cannot expect that, for example, if there would be, let's imagine that, that there would be like a political debate today with, Joe Biden really pushing for New START agreement, Russia eventually agreeing, and Trump really pushing against it, right? That's just like thought experiment, right? So maybe, in that case, we cannot expect that the public suddenly will, learn everything about it, right? They will not be educated. Actually, they will know very little, and they will be trying to get some, some very little cues, that have from around them, from social environment, from media, from their parties, from experts about what to think about it, right? So that's,
if I may, so basically we had a bunch of questions on the knowledge in the questionnaire, right? And if it turns out, if people know even very little about arms control, that already significantly influences their attitudes. And I think that's really good news, right? Because knowing only a little helps already. So
That was kind of my big takeaway from the paper. I really zeroed in on that finding.
No, absolutely. Here you can see that when it comes to arms control, the age actually didn't matter much. It was just like overwhelming support, across generations. That doesn't mean that in other nuclear aspects, the age doesn't matter. I remember we published some paper on disarmament in the past where we could see that the age was actually like very good predictor of how people think about it. But here it clearly doesn't matter that much. But the knowledge aspect really mattered a lot, right? I mean, when we saw that people had at least some information, some basic knowledge, the support was higher than those that had no clue. And we were trying to not just ask them, as many people do in surveys, if they have the knowledge. We actually tested the knowledge a little bit to see, how much they know. So yeah, so I believe that's very important. The education aspect is important because that's actually, you know, as NGOs, academic experts, we actually have like limited scale of things that we can do, right? I mean, there are not so many things that we can do, but we can definitely try to educate people, right? This is kind of our job to some extent. So, and if actually we can see that more knowledge they have, the more supportive they are of something that we believe in, it's kind of it's maybe like a pathway for all of us to some extent.
I think to an extent, like people who are very knowledgeable about the subject, you'll see probably some opponents in that group as well.
Yes,
right?
no,
Because,
absolutely. It's just a
it's not going to be like linear relationship.
It's not everyone. Yeah, that's for sure. At the intersection, I mean, I find these debates about the intersection of gender and disarmament, but also like climate change and disarmament fascinating. These are like really important, interesting topics that all of us are reading about in scholarly and expert journals. I'm very skeptical if like for most people, even for young ones, the link is obvious. Of course, that young people are more interested in the intersection of gender and race, that's obvious, right? For them, it's way more important than it was for the older generation. I'm a little bit doubtful whether like these connections that we have in the very narrow academic debate, if somehow this is shared by most people, if they understand the linkage. But again, I mean, I guess the education can be like one of the tools that we have at our disposal, and we don't have many of these tools, so this could be one of those that can work.
Since education is very much our mission, I think this is a very appropriate message to end the formal part of the seminar on, but please join me in thanking our speakers again for a very interesting talk.